Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to SnapTech IT's monthly webinar. My name is Ted Hulsey. I'm Chief Revenue Officer for SnapTech IT and your host for today's event. Thanks for joining in for the live session. This webinar will be recorded and circulated to all registrants. The topic for today is migrating your file server to the cloud, best practices for cloud-based file collaboration. Today, I'm joined by our co-founder and CEO, Carl Bickmore. Welcome to the call, Carl.
Hi, Ted. Thanks for having me. Excited to have a conversation about something we're seeing a lot of people making a good transition and really fundamentally changing their access to files in a happy and more modern way.
Yeah, and I guess it just bears mentioning. It's funny, Carl and I were on a sales call yesterday with the prospective client. This issue was kind of very top of mind, and then we're heading out to a prospective client this afternoon where this is like a major agenda topic, modernizing infrastructure. So we see this a lot. Maybe it's not the sexiest topic for everybody, but I think it's a huge issue for leaders to think about, like, how are you working with files? How are you working with content in your business? Because it can make a huge difference in terms of the architecture of your IT and how you're leveraging the cloud. So let's look at this in a. Go ahead, Carl.
It's so true. I think at the onset, if you just said, hey, I have this server somewhere in my office, and that's where all of our files are, you might be doing it the old way, and there might be a better way. That's a little bit about what this is about.
That's right, and that's how to boil it down. And we'll go through that in the next couple slides here. But Carl and I are going to divide and conquer today's content. I really want to encourage you, if you have questions, to go ahead and drop them into the Q&A feature. But I'll take the front section here, and we're going to talk about some of the traditional challenges of having a file server on premises. And then we're going to talk about really what's happening in the market, what users want and need, and when it comes to working with content in the workspace, and how people want to be able to collaborate and work with their content. And then we'll change gears. I'll hand the ball to Carl, and he'll talk about how we talk to clients about this particular challenge and some of the different nuances to it and what we often recommend. So let's kind of get into it. One thing we like to do on these webinars is make sure we spend 10 to 30 seconds just saying who we are. So if you're not familiar with SnapTech IT, we are a security-first managed service provider. We have offices in Atlanta, Georgia, Phoenix, Arizona, and San Francisco, California. The way we work with clients is we either provide them with fully managed IT services. That's where we really take care of everything. Or alternatively, if it's a larger organization that has an IT manager or department, we also provide co-managed IT services. So let's get into the content here. So traditionally, say over really the past, say 15 to 20 years, most of the time clients would have files in a file server on premises. So we have here, a very traditional network diagram. And what you see here is you see the different servers that organizations would typically have, and you see the file server right there. And the traditional advantages of having a file server on premises is it's on the local area network, it's super fast, access to the files is super easy. The file server shows up as a drive letter in the Windows Explorer. This has been the age-old way of managing files and content for really decades. And it's very familiar to users. And it's a very stable way to do it, and it's secure. Over the years, Microsoft, provided a lot of different security capabilities that would allow an administrator or the MSP to control who sees what on the file server. Now, the challenge with this is that, in principle, if the file server is on site, that's where the files live. And users, as we all know, we now work in a remote work world. We've gone through this pandemic where remote work has really exploded in adoption. It was already a big trend before the pandemic, but the pandemic just turbocharged remote work. And so now organizations are hiring people further away from their office locations. They're hiring talent wherever they can find them. Organizations are becoming more distributed. And so Today, if all of your files are on site, you then have all of these users and employees that are spread throughout the world who need to get back access to get access to those files, and that introduces a lot of potential complexity. The other thing to think about is if your files are on site, you need really robust on-premises infrastructure. You of course need the servers themselves, but you also need to think about backup and disaster recovery and business continuity for that server infrastructure. If that location goes down, if there's a power outage, if there's a weather event, if the office burns down and all your files are there, you need to make sure that that data and infrastructure is protected. And so we also often will put in place a lot of backup and disaster recovery infrastructure to protect a client's on-premises file servers. So this was the way to be doing it. We have a lot of clients who still do it this way, but really what we're talking about today is trying to solve a lot of the challenges that we see clients having. So here's a different look at that network diagram. So if you have teleworkers, if you have remote users, if you have executives working from home, if you have permanent remote staff, they all need secure remote access to the file server. Usually what most people have been using over the past 15 to 20 years is VPNs. And generally speaking, you could just say most people don't like VPNs. There's always problems with password and authentication issues. It's sometimes hard to integrate with your authentication scheme. It's definitely more work to support. It's definitely not very mobile friendly. It's as our iPhones and iPads have become more important to how we work and live. Remote access to a file server over your phone has not traditionally been very easy. And we're also working with a lot more multimedia content and larger files. And again, working with a lot of large content or a lot of multimedia content over a VPN and remote to a file server is not that elegant of a solution. So there's a lot of challenges. And then we kind of talked about, if you do have an on-premises file server, you really need to, there's a lot of feeding and care that infrastructure needs. I mean, first of all, servers only last, you really want to refresh your server infrastructure every 5 years. If you don't, what you often start running into is performance issues. You often run out of hard drive capacity on those servers. You've got to maintain the operating systems on those servers and make sure they get up to date. And if you don't do those things, what you start to see is performance issues. Sometimes there'll be overheating as servers get old. The fans will fail. The heat, the heat dissipation elements on the server might fail. And when servers overheat, they reboot. So there's all these challenges with running really robust server infrastructure, and often the server infrastructure is supporting the file serving strategy of an organization. So we're very good at managing servers. We know really how to keep clients' infrastructure at the right age, and we know how to maintain it. But you can run into hurdles and challenges with on-premises file servers. Okay, now, and let's talk about what users want. I mean, from a user perspective today, people want to be able to work from anywhere and any kind of device. They want to be able to, when they're in the office, have all the benefits of a speedy file experience. When they're on their laptop computer in their home office or on the go, they want quick access to their files. They want to make sure that all of their content is in sync. So when they hop on an airplane and you're on a pokey Wi-Fi connection over an airplane, you have most of the files you need to do your work on your laptop. So you want to be synced and ready to go no matter where you go. And people want to be able to do productive things from their mobile devices. They want to be able to open Word docs, open Excel files, make sure they have the right version of a file. On an iPad, open a PowerPoint presentation and share it with a client or a prospect. So the way we work has really evolved. We also want to do very conventional things with files, but do it in a better sort of way. We want to be able to share large files. We want to be able to share recordings and multimedia and video content, and we don't want to do that by attaching it to an email. We also want to know when we share content with somebody externally that they received the file, that they can get to it securely, that we can put a password on it. We want to get those notifications. And then we also have more and more opportunities to collaborate with colleagues internally or with clients and customers or business partners externally. So we want to be able to collaborate on our content more and more. And that means we need to do things like co-editing documents. And we want a solution that's very deeply integrated with the most common productivity and cloud applications like Microsoft 365, traditional applications like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and so on. And we want, as users, generally a more cloud-centric sort of solution. So that's kind of my part of the dialogue here today, reviewing where we've been, some of the challenges we see with on-premises file server infrastructure, and then kind of what the users want to get out of file collaboration today. And with that, let me kind of turn things over to Carl, and he'll take it from here.
Thanks, Ted. Well, I'm impressed, Ted. Usually you're not the nerd in the room, but you laid out a lot of pretty nerdy stuff there. That was pretty good. But I would hope that everybody, there's a lot of people on this call, a lot of people in different backgrounds, but I hope at the high level, you can relate to what it's like to either it being a pain to get after your files or to get to them when you're traveling, or you can only do it on certain systems, or to follow the proper security measures to get to them, to access them remotely. Or if you don't have the proper security measures and you're accessing remotely, things like VPNs and multi-factor authentication, the amount of risk that you're putting out there is probably more than you think. So these are all just really important questions. So look, there is a more modern approach. It's a cloud-based approach. It's so funny. For the longest time, everybody would talk about, hey, we need to go to the cloud. We need to do this. And so they say, well, don't have servers on premise anymore. Put servers up in the cloud. But I like to refer to this as taking what's more like a serverless approach. There's no servers anywhere. There's just a system for files that is shared in a secure way. And let's be clear about it. There are multiple products out there that do this. You probably have interacted with many of them. There's things like Dropbox or Box or OneDrive for Business or SharePoint data. These are all great solutions, and all of them can serve at some level. I would recommend them, like, for instance, for personal use in certain scenarios. But when it comes to your business, there's a few reasons why we regularly recommend the Ignite platform specifically. I think there's really probably three that fit in that zone, and it's not for us important that it's specifically Ignite, but you have to understand it is fundamentally more functional than many of its competitors from a business standpoint, particularly for large files and particularly for the security and compliance side of things, meaning keeping your data secure. And so we internally use Ignite platform. We have many customers using it, and it is the product that we highly recommend, and basically allows you to take whatever server you're using for files and really just take it offline and move everything out to this Ignite platform, but still provides a lot of the functions you're looking for. So it can now be accessed on a mobile where you can sync and share. You can access on your laptop. You can access from a web page. And it has a high degree of data security and compliance, like the permissions and the ability to secure it are better than others. And so what does that mean? That means you can have more of a server-like control. Sometimes people, other than maybe the paths changed slightly in the migration or something, won't notice that they're not on a local server anymore. And that's amazing because it's not there anymore. Now, for very large files, there's interesting, cool things you can do to make that very functional too. But it's amazing how users don't have to pay attention. The transition is fairly easy. And what you just have is new ways to access. You get the ability to access files without having to go through the VPN in the same way you're used to. You just open up your laptop wherever you are, and there's your network drive like you are sitting at office with a server, and it functions as you normally think it does. The burden on IT is highly reduced. We were just looking at a quote for a customer, and just the cost to back up their servers, not to actually provide the servers to manage, maintain, and just the cost to back up was 4 times the cost of this solution. That's a pretty amazing stat. It's like, well, why would you get the server and then also pay for the necessary backup to make that server readily available when you could do this instead? And as it says there on the slide, it's a seamless transition. That's one of the things that's really nice about the Ignite platform in particular, is it will show up in your Finder on a Mac just like any other network resource would, or it shows up like a drive letter on a Windows-based system, which is what a lot of businesses primarily use. And that feels very familiar. And that makes it easy for people to understand who have gotten used to that dynamic of I'm saving to a file, a drive letter for work things. And so the migration is helpful, and it's not a big transition for the user's experience, which is nice. The key things here: work from anywhere, the mobile experience. I regularly pop it open on my iPhone. I see it on my iPad as well. Works on Android. It makes it super easy for you to collaborate. You can pick any file and share it, and it can have default settings for security, like it will tell you if it's accessed. It will let you set up so that the person has to use a password to get to it. You can even send file requests to people where you send them a link and they click on it, and it provides them a window that they can drag and drop files to send to you. And those can be big or small, but a convenient way for them to send them to you over the system in a secure way. And it's also very easy to collaborate. You can go through the process of opening a Word document or Excel document or PDF document with somebody anywhere in the world connected. All they need is the link. They don't need to be on Ignite specifically, and together you can work on that document. That's a pretty powerful function as well. All these things come from this particular platform that are just added to the fact that you can operate on it like you normally do with files when you're in the office connecting to your server, which of course also is available. So it's what you traditionally had plus more is a way of thinking of it. The other key thing is, Ted, I like the way you said at the beginning, we're a security first managed IT provider, managed service provider, MSP, if you will. We have a hard time recommending some of these cloud-based solutions that function similarly to this because few have the security and compliance controls. And we know that of all the things that we need to do when we make recommendations to our customers is it needs to be a secure solution so the data isn't at risk from the hackers, but also from insider people. Maybe somebody's getting let go and they're going to decide to do something stupid with the files. These are kind of things that we see out there. There's great ways to prevent this access, whereas the other platforms that do this kind of cloud file system are not as good in our experience. So you don't have the same level of fine-grained permissions with other products as you do with Ignite. You don't get the auditing reporting at the same level. You don't get the same level of NTFS or server-like permissions, if you will. And the one other nice thing about the Ignite platform is it has additional levels of threat detection and response capabilities, which, for instance, if heaven forbid, for some reason, somebody made bad choices and somebody got in and started a ransomware event, and they happen to get access to your Ignite folder because they took over a computer that had access to it, it's very easy to just simply roll that back, and no need for paying ransom to get access to the files that are inside of Ignite. You simply just say, I want them in their last version, and they'll go right back to where they were. It's a pretty powerful thing like that. It's very difficult for it to be compromised at a greater level than that. And that's something that we've seen a lot of folks run into problems. It's like, not only when their file server is compromised and gets the ransomware affected, a lot of times their backup gets deleted at the same time, so they can't restore and they get stuck. That just doesn't really happen with this Ignite dynamic. And so that's, I think, an important piece as well. We have several clients on this product here. We have, yeah, there we go. Sorry, just moving the screen around a little bit. Ted, what are you doing, Ted?
Sorry.
One little testimonial from one of our clients, Zach over at Energetics. This is one of our clients that's out of the Atlanta-based area, and we've been working with them for a really long time. They were a great example of where they had an old aging server. They were staring down the replacement of it and the costs related to that and the costs related to management, maintaining, and backing up that server. And we were able to take them from all the problems they were having with that local server and the costs they're looking at for replacing it, and really flip it into a more modern approach, which is this cloud file system approach. Using the Ignite solution, we are able to remove the need to connect to VPN to get access to files. We were able to change their file sharing, still maintain strong and effective permissions. And now they had the ability to look at version control. One thing with Ignite is you can go to any file, you can say, show me the last version, show me the last 20 versions, and you can see and look at them and just easily pull them up if a file's been edited or maintained. And of course, backup and recovery is built into the product. And of course, scalability as well. It can go to many terabytes of data in one solution, fairly straightforward. And you don't have to buy new servers or add new hardware or new backup providing. So you simply buy the Ignite product, and it includes the ability to scale quickly. So that's why, with that client and with other clients, we've been recommending this. It's more flexible. The storage is very expandable to whatever your need is. We see this a lot with customers, like their data has grown through the years, and they don't even know where all of it is, but they just feel like they can't get rid of any of it. And starting to build servers that locally that can hold the capacity of all that data starts to become really untenable, very difficult to afford the server, difficult to afford the backup necessary to make it all readily available. And this is a very slick, easy way of having all the flexibility and storage you want, build it as you need it, only pay for what you use, and additional features that you typically don't get with the server, like the file retention, the ease of collaboration inside and outside your company, the access on mobile devices. Another thing that's particularly good about the Ignite solution over other cloud file systems providers we've seen is it's particularly great with really large files, like large design files, AutoCAD files, Revit, 3D rendering files. It does a great job of making that experience. Like one of our customers who's done webinars for us in the past to talk about this is a mechanical and electrical engineering firm. And all they do all day long is work in large AutoCAD and large drawing files. And Ignite changed their world because they have locations here and in other countries, and they needed a way to be able to collaborate and work everywhere with these very large files. And this was the solution that really solved that for them. And so it's just an example of how flexible it is. And I think it's not to be glossed over, because those are typically very difficult to deliver in a cloud file system with other providers. So it's just worth noting.
Yeah, I mean, Carl, maybe comment on the Ignite Turbo server. I think I have the term correct. Do I have the term correct?
Yeah, it's a pretty unique thing that Ignite has. I mean, I think some other providers have some versions of this now, but for many years they were the only provider that has this, and it's one of the ways that we use the product. Ignite can have a different type or a local server, or even your old server that you just want to repurpose and let ride because it's not like a disaster recovery thing anymore, where you can sync to a local server and still provide the local server experience for something like an AutoCAD file, which means that you don't ever have to deal with the delays of dragging something down over the internet when you're connecting to that local server or local Ignite server or appliance in the minutes. The benefit is you don't have to worry about backing up that server, and you don't have to buy an expensive server like you would for traditional file server access at normal performance. And so it turns out that becomes a very flexible solution, because you can provide large amounts of data, synchronize it across multiple locations, and when people are in the office, they can access that local server for the local server experience, or when they're out, they can access it from just their laptop directly over the internet, and all of it works seamlessly. The user doesn't have to think I'm now accessing this way or that way. It all feels the same to them, and it will just provide the highest performance version to them, and tends to work really well. And that's how that works with things like a design firm or an engineering firm, or even construction firms that are doing large blueprint drawings or lots of pictures in the field, and they want to deliver those back easily. Just grab your iPad, take the pictures, and load them up, and you're set. It works really well.
All right, super. Let's. So we covered a lot of ground, and I'm struggling here on a laptop, but hold on one second. Okay, back in Q&A mode. So we covered a lot of ground. What we want to do now is take your questions. So please drop your questions into the Q&A feature, and Carl and I will address your questions. Let's take the first one from Jason. For us, the file server is one piece. We also have an AP, DC, RDS server, all VMs on the same physical server. Do you recommend moving everything to the cloud at the same time?
Good question. And the recommendation is on something like that is pretty specific. And that's a really good point to make. We are talking about the server that shares your files. It doesn't replace all functions. And I think for some customers, maybe there is a smaller, less expensive to backup server that remains for the other features, like delivering a specific application. Like there are applications that's just famously are not good to be delivered from the cloud. And that's going to remain that way. A lot of times we run into accountants' offices or even a manufacturing organization that might have a significant like ERP product or manufacturing product that is being used, and that still is going to need a local server for that. And so this is really talking about the file serving question, if that means. And whether you migrate everything to the cloud at once really depends on your scenario, what applications you need to use, want to use. In my mind, the path you want to get to is having all of your products being delivered from a SaaS vendor and then moving your file system to the cloud. And then you have no servers anywhere. You simply, manage your Active Directory control through Azure Active Directory to the PC or the Macintosh computer, and then, Macintosh, let me say in old words, Apple and Mac OS, right? But you can still manage the control through the directory system through a cloud service. Your applications are SaaS provided through web interfaces typically or similar things, and your files are delivered through a cloud file system. But if you can't migrate all of your servers to the cloud all at once, moving just the file server to the cloud has benefits and probably is still less expensive than the cost of maintaining those resources on that physical server and backing it up. Because typically for customers, their largest data set is their raw files that they share through network drives. And that's where the greatest expense in maintaining a local backup is, and the greatest expense in maintaining that operating system that you don't have to anymore. So Jason, I hope that answers your question. It's the answer is maybe, but in an ideal world, you do get to a spot where you're not dealing with the server cycle at all. But if that's not possible, that doesn't mean you shouldn't consider moving just the file portion.
Right, and I think we mentioned it at the top. I mean, the client we're going to be visiting with this afternoon or prospect, that's really going to be the conversation. I mean, I think we have a pretty strong recommendation to migrate their file server to the cloud, but there's other functions and there's probably other line of business applications that they have that will need to maintain server infrastructure on site. But we're going to be able to right size the backup and disaster recovery capabilities we put in, which mean they don't need the most massive servers when we uplift the servers, and we're gonna be able to right size their backup and disaster recovery infrastructure and really give them kind of the best of both worlds as their application set over time continues to evolve.
Yeah. So. I mean, look, it's all about like thinking through the remote access dynamic and how that works. Like, for instance, if let's say you have QuickBooks in your office and you got files that are being shared, and maybe you have some application like a tax application or a manufacturing server, some kind of database and things like that, you're going to do a hybrid approach where you're going to move maybe some things to Azure Active Directory, some things to a cloud file system like Ignite, and maybe the QuickBooks still needs to be local because you can't use the online version, which is a really common problem because it's typically not as functional. And QuickBooks famously does not deliver well over the cloud. And so you might still have some form of remote access for that, but you no longer have to deal with that for files. Much like how most of us have now moved our email services from on-premise servers to the cloud with Office 365, you can do this with your files as well. We just have a strong preference for the performance and security of Ignite, but the concept remains true almost no matter what product you use, just what's appropriate for your business. In most experiences, I just have to say that the Ignite solution is very, very good and worth considering because of its flexible nature and how it can appear like a server, which makes it function with applications that you might have that need to make it look like a server. It's just a very flexible, very, very powerful program in that regard.
Yeah, so a couple more questions just came in. So Molly asks, you guys mentioned the collaboration benefits associated with this system. Is that just for internal users, or are you referring to file sharing with outside entities as well, like clients, for example? Those functions are built into the system. So talk a little bit about external collaboration, Carl.
Yeah, great. So thanks for the question, Molly. Look, it's definitely for external as well. And so, for instance, it's very simple for you to just right-click a folder in Ignite on your computer and say share, and then it will default to the security settings, which we usually set for things like, hey, require this password, notify it's linked, expire it after X amount of days so it doesn't stay out there forever. But you can kind of pick and choose how you want that to work. But fundamentally, you can right-click any folder or file inside of Ignite, or inside the web app or on the mobile app, you can just simply send somebody a link rather than emailing them a big file, or maybe you can't because it's too big. You just send them a link, and on the other end, they receive the email, they click the link, they enter the password if that's the way you decide to do it from a security standpoint, and simply the file is presented for them to download, or it could be presented to them as a document they can simply read online and interact with and are not able to download, depending on how you want the security of it to work. But nonetheless, it's very simple and easy for somebody to share it with anybody that they choose to, and specifically that they have permission to be able to send it to. But the ability to collaborate, or as also expressed earlier, the ability to send file requests to people, where you can simply go to a client or a vendor and send them a link. It says, you go into your file folder structure in Ignite, create a folder that you want their files to be dumped into, and then you right click and you say a file request, and then it sends them a link, they click it, it opens the window and says, put your files in here, and they simply drag and drop them and copies them into that and sends them back to you securely. Really can do it with small or large files or entire folders, and they all will come back and just be sitting right there in that folder that you created for those to be dumped into. That file request function is pretty powerful and a great way to interact with clients and vendors. There is yet one third option too, where you can actually create accounts that are not fully licensed and charged for accounts in the same way, for vendors and clients that you interact with all the time, where they can simply go and log into a web page, and anything that's in that particular folder that you've given permission to, they can always interact with by grabbing files or putting files into back and forth in a very simple way. So you can have like ongoing ones, so you don't have to share it every time. You could share a folder or a set of folders with somebody, give them an account, and they can log in and access them. We do that actually with a lot of our customers on our regular QBR reporting process, where some we send them the link every time because that's what they prefer. They just want to get the email and click it. And others, we give them an account and they simply log in and grab those reports and whatever they want anytime on an ongoing basis. So it's a fantastic way to collaborate like that. Not to mention the ability to co-edit. So you could open a document and work on a PowerPoint or a Word file or an Adobe file right there with somebody where they're in their office, you're in your office. It could be internal or external users in that scenario.
Yeah, it's really the external collaboration options are really just use your imagination of all the different industries and verticals that have different workflows where your external collaborators need to give you content securely. I mean, think about it, lawyers, you're often doing, maybe a bunch of document review, and you have requests where the client needs to upload a whole bunch of documents, and you want to do that securely, and you don't want to do it via email because email is super cumbersome, and you want to do it easily and securely. And so you send them the document request. Anybody in the financial vertical, anyone, mortgage brokers, any sort of financial advisors who need to gather, statements and secure financial information from a client, you can send them the folder, they upload the files to the folder, and then you guys have a secure mini collaboration space, which is just you, just the client, just collaborating on that one folder.
So there's a key point to make about this real quick, and it's the power of it being your everyday file system and the place where you collaborate, because I think a lot of people miss this. Like, a lot of people may have one place where they store their files, and then they'll go to something else and temporarily use it to share a file. Maybe it's a quick Dropbox link or something like that. And the problem is those products actually do tend to transfer the files securely, and they'll even say we do secure file transfer, which is typically accurate to that extent. But you don't think about it, it's like the person on the other end, what if you wanted to pull their ability to see that file anymore? Or what if you wanted to limit how often and when? So when you have like an Ignite system set up, all the security in place, when you share and you put it into your system, you're also always keeping it within the bounds of the same program. So you don't have users out there using random file storage things that could produce the ability to send files you didn't want to have sent, or receive files you didn't want to have come into your network. Things get closed off automatically so people can't go around finding links and dump things into your network that are dangerous. There's just so many benefits when you keep it all cordoned off into a single system that can do all this in one place, both be your file sharing tool and your main file system, and set up securely. And so that's a really powerful thing that I think a lot of people don't think through all the way to what that means, because what most people do today is they'll have their file server or even their own cloud system, but then they'll interact with somebody else in a totally different one that has completely different security, and you're adding extra risk when you're doing that.
That's right. That's right. So another question from Molly, Carl. Also interested in how long you guys have been using this system. How long has it been around?
Oh yeah, good question. So I think at SnapTech adopted, I'm going to say maybe it's 2012, 2013. So we're getting into the 10-year range, something like that. Another thing I think is a great way when you're thinking about vendors is looking out there at the industry reputation of the products and looking out there at the third party let's say non-biased reviews of it, things like the Gartner Magic Quadrant or the Forrester reports. And what you want to look for this is which ones are enterprise cloud file systems. That's how they categorize ECFS, right? And Ignite has consistently been the top right leader quadrant of that for easily 10 years, with a couple of other providers that you'll see out there like Box.net and Citrix ShareFile. Those are usually typically the three leaders of that particular space and have been for years. This has been used in the enterprise large file space for years and years and years. And it's something that we have found really works well in small business for at least the last 10 years. But they have more of a reputation with Fortune 500 companies, but nonetheless, the product is very doable in a small business space. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so flexible. And one of the reasons why I think it has such good security is because it's tested and proven in these very large secure environments that are complex. But it's very, very approachable from a small business standpoint as well.
Yeah, and I'll make a plug that I'm very impressed with Ignite's user interface and just the absolute slick integration with the Microsoft 365 platform. I've worked in my prior life. I worked at Dropbox. I've worked at other companies that had similar sorts of products, and the user interface, especially on mobile. The iPhone and the iOS app is super slick. The ability to go from working, like accessing a file on your phone to opening up Word or PowerPoint on your mobile device is super slick. And it's very compelling and just really a joy to use, I would say.
Another use case on the mobile that we've seen that customers have been very happy with is a construction customer that had lots of pictures they want to constantly be sending back to the home office in order to let them know progress or show them issues and things like that. And so they put Ignite Mobile on controlled managed iPads. That's how they chose to do it. You can do it on your iPhone too or whatever. And if you have the app, you just open up and just take pictures and boom, it drops right into the folder, right where you want it for that particular customer or that job or that matter. And it's a very simple, easy thing to do. It didn't flow through any other system, and it's already where it needs to be. You don't have to receive it, download it, and then move it somewhere on your server or anything like that. It just drops right into the folder you want it to.
Okay, and maybe Carl, maybe a final question. Talk to us a little bit about what's involved in a file server migration project. Roughly, how long does it take us to get it done? That sort of thing.
Well, that's like that could be a little bit different from customer to customer, server to server. But it's what you're looking at is there's a couple methodologies we have because we've been doing it for a while. There's some products that Ignite provides to do this as well. But basically, you go to the server locations or servers where you have these file shares on them. There's a file transfer utility that you use to kind of tell it what files to drop up there. And then we connect it to things like your Azure Active Directory or your local Active Directory, depending on how you want to do user login to it and all that. And then we go through the process of transferring the files up, and then we do a cutover experience to make sure that the Ignite client is installed on all the machines. So it shows the drive letter and it goes across smoothly. And then we provide user guides so they can learn how to use it on the mobile and some training around that. But, that process, there's a few hours involved in the labor, but it really depends on how much data you have to transfer across how many servers into the Ignite system. So that really can vary quite a bit depending on how much you have to go. But it's a one-time hit up front to do some of that labor work to get it up there, and then you're out of the server game. You don't have to do any more server migrations for that file anyway, for a file server anyway, and you're off and running. Just start paying their monthly fee for their service, and the migration's done. So Small versions, 10 hours, big versions, 40 hours maybe. You know, kind of that's probably the range of labor it takes to go through that, get that all transferred up and buttoned up and all the workstations set up and all the mobile users connected, so forth, so on, as a frame of reference.
So I think it's super helpful in terms of kind of the high level overview process. And we are doing server migrations all the time for clients. It's one of our most common projects where we're helping organizations modernize their infrastructure and, you know, go completely serverless in some cases, or migrate certain functions, giving them more agility, getting them more cloud centric. So all of the above are things we do on behalf of clients, whether they're new to us or, you know, a client that's been with us a couple of years and this was an item on the roadmap, and now we're going to tackle this part of modernizing their infrastructure. Because we're always doing that with existing clients, where we always have a roadmap of, you know, projects, and we're trying to, you know, continuously prioritize them, and then in, you know, certain quarters we'll pick off another project to modernize a different aspect of the technology stack of the client.
Well, and I think another key thing is a lot of times people continue to maintain servers because of the applications or things they're doing, and they've been told, hey, this doesn't really work. You might be surprised on your ability to migrate files using like the Ignite style solution. There's some pretty good use cases. We've interacted with some pretty heavy client server applications that have worked with it as its file system, where it thinks there's a server there, and Ignite seems to emulate it just fine. And so if you think, hey, I can't do this yet, you might be ready for a modern approach. You might be ready for a newer attack and not aware that there's a solution that works this way now.
Okay, well, it looks like we've exhausted all the questions around file server migration. We can wrap up here a couple minutes early. I want to let everybody know about our July webinar. It's going to be on CMMC, Back to Basics, 7 Tips for Manufacturing Leaders. So we're going to be delving into cybersecurity and compliance for defense contractors next month. So keep an eye on your email box if that's a topic that's relevant for you. It's a little more of a verticalized conversation. And we want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us live today. We really appreciate the questions. It keeps the discussion very dynamic and interactive, so we appreciate it. This content will be posted up on YouTube very shortly, so if you want to share it with a colleague, we will be sending you a link to the on-demand version of the file, and it will show up on our YouTube channel. So feel free to share it with a colleague and reach out to us. If you're a prospective client and you want to take this conversation further, we would love to pick up where the webinar left off and have a discussion around your needs. Or if you're an existing client, please talk to your account manager about going a level deeper on this topic. So with that, Carl, thanks a lot for joining me for today, and we look forward to seeing everybody on next month's webinar. Take care now.